Hello and welcome to the second of Cinema Eclectica's seasonal minisodes. This is the one where we count down 10 to 6 of our favourite films of 2019. I'm Graham, and this week I've been joined by Rob.
Yes, hello there.
And Aidan.
Hello.
But we've also been joined by Sarah, except not joined. We've been unjoined. We've been, hang on, I've started badly and it's only going to get worse. What this means is that Sarah has also recorded her top 10 of the year, and we're going to listen to 10 to 6 of hers right now.
For my number 10, I'm going to go with The Irishman. Everyone talks about the length, but feel the quality of this film. That, or they mention the CGI face shenanigans, or they whisper the scary spectral word swan song. Yes, it's more wholesome tales of a bunch of good fellas bringing jobs to the region, helping their friends to succeed, and supporting local business. De Niro, Pesci and Pacino all play their usual men's men, and De Niro's character looks back in time to how things were in the good old days. And more to the point, how he survived when captions pop up throughout the film as to how certain people met their end. Harvey Keitel features as a big boss, and as with when I watched him in Madame in 2017, I had the feeling that as an actor he may be slowing down and reducing his workload, and I think maybe watching his health. It's a masterful telling of more stories from the mafia, and in a world of binge watching, Scorsese gives the fans what they want. My next film is... Do you know what it is? It is The Nightingale. A surprise choice because it's brutal. So writer and director Jennifer Kent has made a handful of films previously, the most known of which is The Babadook. It stars Aisling Franciosi as Claire Carroll and Bekali Ganambar as Aboriginal tracker Billy. Kent and the two leads develop the relationship between the two brutalised souls so gently, from fear at arm's length with a gun to a warmth and protectiveness brought about by the shared traumatic experiences survived by the pair. There is a respectful depiction of indigenous shamanic ritual and spirit forcing itself to almost reassemble the flesh that hosts it, which I thought that's one of my interests, and that's something that I thought they did very well. I think the tendency when you depict any kind of spiritual activity is to almost mock it, and that wasn't what was happening here, so I thought that was very well handled. Kent says of the film what Margaret Atwood says of The Handmaid's Tale: there is nothing included in the film that has not happened in real life. In the real history of the colonisation of Australia and where this film is set, Tasmania, formerly Van Diemen's Land, the only demons here are the white colonists who brutally oppress everything around them through murder, torture, theft and rape. Did you know that the territory is more properly known as Lutruwita in the original Talawa Kent Aboriginal language? The film is an ordeal, but it's so very important that these true stories are told. The measure of how civilised a society is how they treat their most vulnerable. True in the past as much as it is today, as we very recently in Britain have been forced to confront. Speaking the truth can be a dangerous game, but the Margaret Atwood approach will also set you free. Okay, my next film is also slightly unexpected, and it wasn't on any of the shows, but we went to see it just because it was on, and I was just like, oh, I don't know. Okay, so my issue with so it's Hustlers. Which my issue with it, with sort of being a little bit reluctant to go and see, is that it's a J-Lo film, and I've watched lots of, a few J-Lo films, and mostly the kind of, I don't know, maybe two 2.5, 3-star films. The standard comedies, they're slightly under the 3 stars for me, because there's always something of her performance that it just doesn't work for me. Me and JLo don't really get along. You've probably seen it in the papers. It's the pop stars turned actors thing. For the most part, I can't get with it, and I know for sure that Graham will have a specific objection to this. However, I was really surprised. It's written and directed by Lorene Scafaria, who did Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist and Seeking a Friend for the End of the World. This film features JLo as the force of nature pole dancer Ramona, who takes newbie Constance Wu under her wing as the newcomer at a strip club, learning all the tips and tricks to earn more money. And it's based on a true story. And interestingly, the woman who it's kind of based on is, I think she's talking about litigation. She might have raised a case against them because they've depicted her life inaccurately. So she says, allegedly. So that's interesting. I think she was objecting to the pole dancing bit because she wasn't technically a pole dancer, from what I was reading. But anyway, I'm digressing. Okay, as the norm is when they're doing this earning more money at a strip club, morality starts to soften a little bit when the big bucks start flowing in, and maybe they take a few bucks extra here and there from drunken hedge fund bankers and their credit cards. And actually, Ramona has, drugged a few of them, so it's not the most legal of ways of earning a living. But the way they do it is so stylish. It's good music and it's good fun and it's funny. So they get away with their crimes because clients don't really want to admit to how they've lost the money, like entertaining a bunch of strippers. Yeah, sorry, honey, but I've lost all my mortgage entertaining strippers. Right. But of course, no good things last forever. And the film is framed as an interview with the journalist played by Julia Stiles, who I haven't seen enough of in cinema for a while. I did like this film. JLo has a great character written for her and does engagingly well with it. The film was very enjoyable with a good pace, structure, tone and humour as well, and was well received by critics. I've not seen a JLo film I enjoyed this much since Out of Sight, and that was in 1998. So that's my pitch for Hustlers, which I suppose is kind of a surprising choice, but there we are. My next choice, it's a Netflix film and it's released this year and it's called Elisa and Marcella, and it's directed by Isabelle Cochette, which came out in February. I didn't get around to watching it until probably autumn, and I was aware of it and I was just like, oh yeah, if I just remember to watch it. It's about the first same-sex wedding in Spain in 1901. 1901, ladies and gentlemen. They should get an award for going on a bold, dangerous and oceanic adventure, the domestic equivalent of a contemporary Biggie Shacks going to the South Pole. The film is shot in black and white and it's lovely to look at. Really inky blacks and clear whites, sharp whites. One notable shot, actually, fairly early on in the film, has the girls walking along a beach in the distance, and it's shot through a fence that kind of frames it, but also the fence has octopus drying on it, and the shot is framed by their suspended inky tentacles. It just looks gorgeous. It's really gorgeous. The girls formed a romantic relationship in school and took it into adulthood, but obviously, knowing it was illegal in Spain at that time, they moved around a bit. But eventually, one of the women decides to try and pass as a man. She does not do a brilliant job with this. And when she's rumbled, she sort of does a quick swipe of her finger across her upper lip and deletes a moustache, and that's her only concession to trying to appear male, apart from short hair and wearing a suit. So that's quite a funny bit. Unlike most biographies, this film makes a really good story with ups and downs and a good beginning, middle and an end. Unlike, say, Fast and Furious, my adrenal glands were only mildly tested, but this is not my criterion for a good film. For others, this may differ, and I accept that. The film looks beautiful, and I found out the director has a career spanning 35 big years. So my next job is to take in some of her other works. That's Elisa and Marcella, which I think is still on Netflix, actually. And finally, in this segment, I come to my final choice, which is The Gorgeous Pain and Glory by Pedro Almodovar. I love this film. I love Almodovar because his passion for life is present in every one of his colourful frames. This feels like a very intimate and personal film from Almodovar, who's now 70, and basically assessing the creative ebb and flow of the lead character and touching on concerns about ageing, fear of missing out on youth, addiction, mortality, and still being a child alongside the adult. Antonio Banderas, Almodovar's longtime collaborator, plays the director Salvador Malo, basically a cipher of Almodovar himself. The always captivating Penelope Cruz is the mother of the director when he was a child. There's something about her face that you can't take your eyes off. And scenes from this film have stayed with me, especially the cave scenes where Cruz feels humiliated when she has to make her home in a cave. This is one of the flashback scenes to his childhood. The inhabitants of which are known as trogloditas, and where the boy is overcome by a profoundly affecting occasion of early sexual awakening. I wanted to contrast this with an earlier film of his, 1987's Law of Desire, which he made when he was 38. And although this earlier film is a wild soap opera about a love triangle that leads to a murder, and it's all very dramatic, the same themes come up, though. The nature and free expression of desire, what family means, and creative output. But creativity floods out of Almodovar as if he has a direct socket to the essence of life, and his work in this film has lost none of its touch, vivacity and impact. That's Pain and Glory. I can't wait for his next film. I love his films.
So that was Sarah's, but as for us, Rob, what is precisely your 10th favourite film of the year? Not 11th, not 9th, oh no, 10th.
You say that. It's quite funny because I think my 7 through 10 could be filled by about 14 different films. It's quite a trick. But as I speak, if you ask me in half an hour, I might change my mind. But as I speak, my number 10 is a French movie by a filmmaker called Yann Gonzalez, and it's Knife Plus Heart.
Oh, whoa, yeah.
It's a French movie set in the world of gay porn, and I'm assuming it's in the 70s. It has a very 70s feel.
Yeah.
And, well, somebody starts stabbing people up. It's very much a giallo movie. It's shot in the same way. It's got the black gloved killer gimp mask as well. So it gets around the idea of having to have a red herring. It just outright shows you his horrible, contorted gimp mask.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about it, it does look gorgeous, and it works in a way which a lot of post-giallos don't, because a lot of post-giallos say, well, we're just going to run through all the tropes and play all the greatest hits, and it's just soulless, absolutely soulless. Whereas this, it's talking about gay culture, it's including a great turn from Vanessa Paradis, with a subtext about sort of capturing your age in perpetuity on screen, and she just feeling past it. but it's got a lot of heart. It's really well staged. Music from M83 is just really, really good. And it's just something which you don't really see in horror. It's a horror with audacity, really. The idea of a horror being set in the world of gay porn will set a lot of horror bros going, but there's a load of solid wang in it. And I thought, no, behave. There's nothing like that. It's, considering the context of the world it's in, it's incredibly tasteful, but it's also quite scuzzy at the same time. It's quite a marvellous balance and act, and it took me by surprise. I really, really appreciated it and enjoyed it for what it was and what it's saying at the same time.
I think normally I think it's like the lowest form of comedy to come up with a punning porn movie title, but there is a film within a film in Knife and Heart called Homicide, which I think is extraordinary.
Oh, I've just got that gag now. I was reading it literally like it was Homicide. Oh, there's another level I missed it on. Yes, it's great. Because it's about filmmaking as well, which is another sort of button, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's really quite miraculous, I think.
Yeah. So I'm really glad you mentioned Knife and Heart, because it was, like you, I've had great trouble working out the lower end of my top 10. And I realise it would be stereotypical to get rid of something really great and entertaining like Knife and Heart to do something where I have to stop and say, now, come on, give it a chance. But number 10 is a documentary about terminal cancer patients on the Isle of Wight. Now, come on, give it a chance.
Stop there.
It's Ireland, the first solo film, at least, by the British documentarian Stephen Eastwood, so no relation to Clint. It begins with a shot that could come straight out of a Bergman movie of this huge ferry docking, sort of coming out of the fog onto the port of the Isle of Wight. And it keeps that kind of slow, dreamlike feel going throughout it. I mean, anyone whose idea of documentary filmmaking is it's all, handheld camera, fly on the wall stuff, will be astonished at how polished and contemplative Ireland is. And I fought shy of watching it for a bit because, just going to say it again, it's a documentary about terminal cancer patients on the Isle of Wight. But having had people in my family die of cancer this year, I found it a really powerful, honest, but also very sensitive look at it. And there is a moment about sort of halfway through where a man we have seen at the start of the film in a coffin is shown alive and being treated. And it's obviously they've used earlier footage of it, but the lack of chronological progression in the editing makes it feel less like a downer of a dead-end movie. It is a film that celebrates life, and it has a great conversation about fairies, which I don't know about you, but that's always something I look for in a movie.
Not Disney princess fairies, though.
Oh, no, but that's the thing. It is someone specifically complaining about how Victorian fairies are rubbish and sentimental, and proper mythological fairies are really nasty pieces of work, which is a theme I often return to. So I was delighted. I was delighted by that. That's Island by Stephen Eastwood, which it's not going to be the last time I say give it a chance on this review, but it is simultaneously probably the heaviest subject matter and the most unexpectedly rewarding watch I've had.
Okay, that's cool. So, Aidan?
Yeah, so moving on from Graham dissecting terminal cancer patients on the Isle of Wight.
Sorry. He doesn't do that.
Mine's going to zombies. My number 10 is Little Monsters.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Really enjoyed this one. Really enjoyed Lupita Nyong'o, who simply is having like the ball of the year. Really, just it's got full of energy, full of heart. The black humor I absolutely adore. I mean, I particularly love how scuzzy Josh Gad is in this, who is just the seediest child presenter I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
but it is just, even with it all of like Australian dark humor can be like very tough to grasp. I think it's just heart is in absolutely the right place when it's trying to conform to obviously protecting children on top of that. It does something very, very fun, especially with the zombie subgenre that I know I've been sick to death of recently, but this really did help me get through that barrier, really. And I just think with everything that obviously the Peter Nyong'o has established, Abe Forsyth establishes with this film, I definitely do think it's different enough to worth at least several watches, especially if you want to get into like the humor aspect of it, because I absolutely adored this.
Nice.
That's a shock, frankly. I wasn't expecting that to cut in anybody's top 10, but I'm so glad it did.
Yeah.
So we're at number 9.
On to number 9, yes.
And my number 9, well, I'll just preface it by saying at one time, my top 10 had 3 documentaries.
Whoa.
But now I feel rather shameful in saying it only has 1. But it is Penny Lane's movie, which put up by Dogworth, Hill Certain.
I'm looking forward to seeing this. This is part of my anti-Christmas viewing this year.
I don't know how it's happened. It just has happened. How I've become really interested in things like witchcraft and Satanism. I think it's saying something about me in this stage of my life. But this, it goes into the history of what Satanism is, like the movements in the 70s about the Satanic Panic and all the sort of fuss that was happening in America at that time. And it establishes the new, I think it's the new Satanist temple run by Lucian Graves, or at least he is the front man of it. And it talks about what they do, and basically it's not about looking at Satan and
worshipping
him. The word completely escaped me there, yeah. It's not about worshipping Satan. It's about making the world a better place than what you entered it with, improving the lot of other people and doing things with other people that maybe they wouldn't have the chance otherwise. And also just being generally massive trolls.
Yes.
About stuff. But it's not about them. It could just be a very one-dimensional documentary about here are the Satanists, aren't they great? Or come from the other perspective, from the sort of more outraged centre of America. Here are the Satanists, may they burn in hell for all eternity. It doesn't do either of those things, which it'd be excused for doing that. Instead, what it does is use the vehicle of, before I say that, it's one of these things where I imagine they set out to do one of those things, but the story that sort of came naturally from the conversations and the things that they were doing changed the documentary into something else.
Yeah.
Because what it is a documentary about how state and religion are basically one and the same thing in America, and that's where the troll aspect comes in for the new Satanist temple. I found it genuinely fascinating, and it's very telling when you watch a movie and you think, well, guess I'm a Satanist now. to watch that and feel that, I think I'd be doing myself a disservice to not put this in my top 10, because I really, really enjoyed it, and I do like to put a top 10 documentary in my top 10 every year. I feel it's only fair.
Yeah.
And Hill Certain is mine.
Well, at number 9, we've got something which I almost quail to describe, because its appeal is so back to basics, so stripped back, that I think the best advocacy I can give for it is to just say, watch it. But we've said that already. I think when it was our film of the week, we spent the whole show saying that it's the Radio Silence Collective's Ready or Not.
Right.
I'm going to hear this again, but yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, and it's so good it made Aidan fall down a trapdoor by the sound of it.
Much like what would happen in the film.
Yes,
There's a
exactly.
trapdoor in the film, yeah.
Yes. It's just it's a puzzle box that is about puzzle boxes. It's a game of a movie that's about games. It has an absolutely kick-ass, iconic central performance from Samara Weaving. And, oh my God, where have you been? Performance by Andy McDowell. It is a horror comedy that is both genuinely tense and shocking and hilarious. And I put it to you that in any world which ran on sane principles, the Hide and Seek song would be front runner for Best Original Song at next year's Oscars.
Oh, yes.
It won't buy something from Frozen, though, you know it will.
It'll be beaten by either something from a Disney musical or something from an inspirational documentary, because those are the only two types of movies that are allowed to have songs. But if you say you've heard a better original song written for a movie than the Hide and Seek song, you're a dirty liar. It's extraordinary.
Mm. Right, so for my number 9, I am heading towards the most horrifying concept ever known to man that we've ever done on a horror special. Gentrification!
Yes.
Number 9 goes to The Last Black Man in San Francisco. I know I was probably the person who came out loving this the most, really.
Mm.
And I think part of the reason...
liked it, but yeah, you were the champion for it.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I did love it so much is because, honestly, I didn't go into this expecting a buddy movie, really. I did go into this with, well, it was a film with a lot of things on its minds. Yes, friendship, but also history, buildings, architecture, San Francisco as a place to live and breathe. And everything just came through for me as this very intimate space, very glorified space, but no less like a space for these characters to function in and just understand that they have to build the grandfather's house, essentially. All the meanwhile, there's just these detours with it that just really do cement this. I really still giggle at the sight of the group of I want to say unicyclists, but they're not unicyclists. Segways, that's it.
Segways, yes, that's it.
Yes, and it's just every single one of those detours just things like, oh, that seems like an odd detour, but it just feels like really rewarding when you've got so many boring social realist films do the exact opposite. And for me, I think something like The Last Black Man in San Francisco can work to its advantage, really. It can really provide you with a sense of the uncanny and just the weird stuff that goes about day-to-day life. I really love it, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a modern-day city symphony. I like that aspect to it.
Speaking of segues, I've changed my mind. We're on number 8 now. And I was going to talk about Birds of Passage. Great film. But then I literally just a second thought, to hell with that. I can't be bothered with that one. I'll put in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood instead.
Oh, nice.
Because the thing about this is, the top 10 for me are movies that really made the year special, I think. And I don't think I could really make a case for Birds of Passage in that sort of classification. It's an interesting anti-drug war movie, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I think with Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's a movie in which the director has put everything about what makes him tick, what he loves, because he's always suggested what he likes in all of his movies. He drops his references, and his iconic dialogue has always dropped these references to what sort of person he is. But it's always been on a sort of secondary level. Whereas this, he's just completely committed to making this movie about what he loves, and there's an infectious energy to it. Yeah, it's just a hangout movie. Yeah, it's all these things. But it's got some great character moments. And one of the most tense sequences that I think he might have ever done, when Brad Pitt goes into the
Spahn Ranch.
Which is, he gets out of it, but at the same time, you are on the edge of your seat.
Yeah.
I think it also contained Sorry, I think it also contains one of his most respectful sequences as well, which is the whole end sequence, which, of course, people can't really talk about because there's some people who haven't seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood yet. But that really does work when, you people keep going, oh, Jackie Brown's his most mature film, I think, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but, I think this is like,
Yeah, I think there is a real grace to it.
It's his fantasy movie as well. It's a Hollywood fantasy movie. And I think he's really settled. Another thing that I will say is I'm kind of sick of Tarantino revenge movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If he does another one, I don't think I could muster up the attention to really bother with it. But it's completely counter to what Tarantino's been doing for the past decade. And it's just an infectious love of cinema in it, which I don't think has been as obvious in any one of his films. And if you think it's bad because of the way it treats Shannon Tate or Bruce Lee, it's a fantasy film. Grow up, seriously. Especially you, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Come on, you're better than that. That was my number 8, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Well, for me, I was going to do Birds of Passage until I realised I hadn't seen it. So at number 8, I'm going to do Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh, well. Are you just mocking me, though? Is that literally just...
That is literally what I have at number 8. Yes, it's exactly it. I think that in addition to what Rob's just said, all of which I agree with completely, except the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar bit, because I feel like he could still probably beat me up.
Yes, probably.
But in addition to that, I think it grasps the idea of what a movie star is and why we love watching movie stars so well, both in the text of the movie with Sharon Tate watching herself in the middle of an audience for the Wrecking Crew, and in the pleasure we have watching Leo and Brad do stuff that is, in a lot of ways completely normal. There's a whole sequence in this where Brad Pitt drives home, gets into his caravan, feeds his dog, makes macaroni and cheese, opens a beer, watches the TV. If you put this in a Spider-Man movie, people would riot. The pleasure of movie stars rather than movie characters is that you can enjoy watching them just be themselves, and as well as the people who were already famous in this, Leo, Brad, Margot, that extraordinarily over-the-top Al Pacino cameo, which I do love. You've also got people to invest in the future. You've got Julia Butters, that astonishing child actor who completely steals those scenes from Leo. You've got Margaret Qualley, who I've loved ever since she was in The Nice Guys, giving a great performance as the Manson family member who lures Brad Pitt's character in. It feels like a film that has a real sense of what cinema can do in the future. It feels like a film that's saying, look, we know you love those Marvel movies, but there is a toolkit of things that movies are great at that are not being used now. Here's some of them. If Tarantino is going to retire soon, as he says he is, he has ended his career on a gracious act of showing us once again the pleasure of a good hangout movie with proper movie stars. I really enjoyed it.
I will also add, it's ridiculous how good Leonardo DiCaprio is in those Western scenes. I really, really love those bits.
Yeah, absolutely. He's just born at the wrong time, wasn't he? Leonardo DiCaprio would make a great Western leading man.
Yeah,
he would indeed. Yeah.
Well, I'm sad to disappoint that my number 8 is not Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I'm afraid. My number 8, instead, I watched this only yesterday, but it is Marriage Story by Noah Baumbach.
Very good film.
Not a film we talked about on the show before.
No.
Yeah. Not a film that we talked about, but I think, half the time I want to mix up my lists on films that we haven't talked about that haven't been like either a film of the week or a B-side.
Yes.
And the thing is with Marriage Story is that, of course, it tells the complex relationship between Nicole, played by Scarlett Johansson, and Adam Driver, who's plays Charlie. And I guess that complex relationship is at the heart of like this very embittered legal system that is tearing their family apart, essentially, which is, of course, divorce and law.
Yeah.
And those scenes involving law are just framed as if they're boxing matches, really. So you have Ray Liotta as Charlie's lawyer going up against Laura Dern's character. And boy, oh boy, if I ever want to see like two acting American heavyweights go at each other, it would be that.
Yeah.
And I mean this with all respect in the world, but by the end of the movie, you do want to punch Laura Dern in the face. I love her, but she is a real horrible woman in this.
You do. Oh, it's so true. It is so true. And I guess that's kind of the...
still.
But no, it is just full of like energy when you've got all these like films, like especially when the indie films are concerned about, the disillusion of the family unit. I think Marriage Story has a particularly strong reason for doing so. Because it's not really about, because even when Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver are at each other's throats arguing, you still get the sense that they don't mean it.
Yeah.
Like, there was something like very disingenuous for me when I saw Hereditary for the first time, and when Toni Collette is just like arguing against Alex Wolff and just saying to him, "Oh, you're not my son, you're not blah, 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 blah." It just seems to me just like, you don't say that. You know what I'm saying?
Like Grandpa Simpson saying he has no son.
But yeah, Marriage Story is just excellent Noah Baumbach screenwriting, all in a nutshell. I loved, in particular, like there's particularly really good inflections of humour. I like the opening sequence where Adam Driver is talking about Nicole's strengths, and then all of a sudden he walks into like this cupboard door or something.
Right.
Just like straight out of a Tom and Jerry sketch or something, but it's full of that. It's full of those little tidbits that do make you think, yes, this is real life, just really complex and well thought out. And I think it's a testament really to how good, Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson is as leading actors and actresses in their heyday, because honestly, I still think they got it, even if, I'm not a fan of the MCU and, I'm a bit more of a fan of Star Wars. Per se, I think to see actors like step outside those zones and provide something that's much more different, to show you what cinema can see outside like big blockbusters, I really do think it's worth your time on that matter.
I cannot imagine a movie making me dislike Laura Dern. I'll have to see it now just to see if that's possible.
It is. It is possible. Adam Driver. When I watched this, I realised that Adam Driver is a proper old-fashioned movie star.
I love him.
It really sank in watching this, I think. You've segued quite nicely for me there, Aidan. I'm going to preface this by saying one of the films of my top 10 is films that come around in genres which I traditionally don't like, or I might think traditionally are flawed. But regardless of my reservations about that genre, I still absolutely love them. I don't think there's no bigger example of this. I think there's two separate levels, which this is the case on this one. But this is Craig Brewer's My Name is Dolomite.
Oh, nice. Yes.
It's a biopic about Rudy Ray Moore. And biopics, I don't care. I'll be honest. Yeah. But in this, it's such a massive turn for Eddie Murphy. This is the Eddie Murphy who was a revelation in the late 80s.
Yeah.
This is Trading Places Eddie Murphy. This is Beverly Hills Cop Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
Nice.
And the absolute effervescence which is just coming out of him is quite something to behold, because he's completely knocking it out of the park, really.
Yeah.
And it also helps that it's about it's about the making of Dolomite, as the title suggests. About a guy who's down and out on his luck, and he just creates his character Dolomite, and makes movies, even though he's got no experience, and all the people around him don't have any experience, which turns into this really infectious sort of advert for making movies, and the camaraderie between people, as well as just being ridiculously entertaining. I don't think there was a moment of this where I didn't have a massive beaming smile on my face. Titus Andromedon is in it. So... the great turn from what's he called? Blade actor. Completely fit.
Wesley Snipes.
Wesley Snipes is great in it as well.
Oh,
It's,
he is really excellent.
It's just such a blast. I could pick something which is objectively great from a top 10. Like, people think, yeah, that's what a good movie is. But sometimes it's just fun. It's absolute blast. And it's not the first movie that I'm going to be talking about, which that is my big takeaway from it. But anyway, you were saying that in your bit,
Yeah. One of the things that I particularly appreciated with Dolomite Is My Name is just how much of like an actor's right it is, because of course we mentioned Wesley Snipes in there, but there's also Cody Smith-McPhee as like the DOP, the director of photography for Dolomite, which Eddie Murphy brings on as like, yeah, they're straight out of film school. They'll do absolutely amazing, and then you just really get this sense of earnesty with like Eddie Murphy, like the ringer who's like welding these characters all together. So like Wesley Snipes, Cody Smith-McPhee. I've forgotten who else was in it. It's yes. Peele's in this. From Key and Peele.
Oh yes, he is, isn't he?
Yeah.
No, Michael Key, isn't it? Michael Key.
I was going to say, I thought Jordan Peele wasn't acting now.
No, his cohort is in it as sort of he's a poet of the streets, basically.
Right.
Ends up writing Dolomite.
Who ends up writing something as crass as Dolomite.
Yeah, and there's like a sex scene in it, which is just great, which is actually in the Dolomite movie. But I think most of all, it's just reignited my love of blaxploitation movies.
Yeah.
And when a movie reminds you why you love something, again, you can't ignore it.
Yeah.
That's my number 7.
Well, my number 7 is something that I suspect is very different in tone, but had a similar effect on me of just filling me with absolute love for a genre that, let's face it, has not produced great work recently. I suppose the trope I'm talking about is Chosen One themed fantasy, and in particular, the absolutely baleful cinematic legacy of one of Britain's greatest legends, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Recently been the basis for an absolutely disgraceful Guy Ritchie movie. There was the unaccountably boring Clive Owen one. But finally, Joe Cornish has produced a King Arthur movie worthy of the name with the kid who would be king, which has a kind of open-hearted honesty that is not fashionable in kids' movies now. For all it is a kind of knowing modern-day take on the Arthur mythos, it takes the ideas of heroism and duty and becoming a better person absolutely sincerely. I watched it on the weekend of the first climate strikes, and it felt remarkably prescient and of its time. It didn't get the audience that it deserved at the cinema, but I'm already meeting people who were saying, no, that was really charming. I don't understand why that wasn't a bigger hit. And I think any child who was lucky enough to see it in the cinema will remember it with nothing but fondness as an adult. And I am here for literally anything that Angus Imrie does next.
It's one of those films that when it's on like bank holiday or Christmas, it'll go down like the gangbusters.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And also it has fans of Cornish from years back will be delighted to know that it has an Adam Buxton cameo. So it's got that as well.
Can't even recall that. But...
He's the tour guide at Stonehenge.
Oh, yes. Now it comes back, yeah. Probably recording a podcast, wasn't he, when he was doing that with his dog?
Yes. Rosie.
Yes. Moving on. Number 7 for me goes to a film that we did as Film of the Week way back. Like way back. I think around about the same time I think we did the Kid Who Would Be King. And it is Barry Jenkins' If Beale Street Could Talk.
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
Do you want to know the best thing about this is that I don't get along with my dad's taste in movies all that much. He absolutely can't stand the MCU. He can't stand a lot of like Hollywood, what Hollywood is doing these days. And he took my mum to see this film, and he came back, coming back to me, with a gleeful step, springing from
Yeah.
the floorboards, saying, "I absolutely love this Aiden." And you know what? He's absolutely goddamn right. It is like a special movie from Barry Jenkins, who, especially when you've got like Moonlight to follow up from, which is like the film that won him the Best Picture Oscar.
Yeah.
I think to make something as sensual as this, with every crack of like the vinyl record player, with every just like burst of like emotion coming through it, it really does rise home his influences ranging from Wong Kar-wai to Claire Denis, and he just makes it his own functioning world, really. Loved it to pieces, loved how like elegant it really is, and just it's incredibly really good film. It's just really good. People need to see it.
I'd love to know how someone can swing from the floorboards, as you claimed your dad does. But if there was a film that could make someone do that, it would be this one.
I think I need to give Barry Jenkins another chance.
Did you see? I forget.
Not that I wrote him off. I just kind of forgot about. I just sort of forgot about him.
Yeah,
fair enough.
It was amazing. I don't know what you're doing here, Ian, but keep it up. But you're setting me up with some really good segues.
Yes, my only thing I want in life.
Because you're talking about Claire Denis there, and the director of this has also starred in some Claire Denis movies, and that director is Matty Diop, and the movie is Atlantiques, which that's 2 Netflix movies on the bounce there. That's weird. I might be. Oh no, let's not say anything else on that matter. But this one, go back to what we were saying previously about genres which you don't like. This sets itself up as a social realist movie about, I think it's Dakar, which it's set about how hard things are, about how the disparity between the ultra rich and everybody else, and the ultra rich refuses to pay the money, the bills, the wages for everybody else.
Yeah,
this group of people. The boyfriend of the lead actress thinks, I'm not getting paid, so me and a bunch of buddies are going to go off to Spain to make our money and earn a living. And then about halfway in, it changes tack completely. It's sold as a romantic drama, which kinda true. What it is, in fact, is it's a movie about African folklore, Senegalese folklore, and it talks about sort of their interpretation of the ghost. I think it's the jinn entirely, which was also in the was Under the Shadow. The movie also tackled them, but this is not a horror movie. This is a movie about sort of the link between life and death, about folklore, about history, about ties of people. Like people's connections. It's enthralling, really, and any sort of alternative interpretations and ones that introduce sort of possession motifs through white, glassy eyes, like I Walked with a Zombie, is all good in my book. And also going back to that sort of social realist idea, this is a social realist. It's shot very handheld, and a lot of actors are what I can only assume are non-professional. Not being a massive authority on African cinema. But despite all that being true, it's also shot absolutely stunningly. When you think about social realism, when I think about social realism anyway, I think about sort of lots of brown and grey and sort of bleh. Whereas this, it's like rich Mediterranean colours and just beautiful vistas it incorporates into the way it tells its story. And I'm not the only one. This is one of the, as far as sort of world cinema sleeper hits of 2019, I think this is it. This is the film that more people really need to have seen and they haven't, because it's the emergence of a real talent. And I can't wait to see what else Matty Diop sort of conjures up, because her incorporation of sort of social issues and mythic folklore, totally up my street. I really love this thing. More I think about it, in fact, the more I like it. It's just one of those films that grows the more you sort of percolate a bit.
Well, Yeah, well, it goes back to when I was talking about If Let the Sunshine In by Claire Denis. I mean, the more that I'd seen that film, well, the first time I saw it, I think I really like that. And then it just grows on you. It makes a bigger impression the more you think about it. And I think something like as you were saying before, someone like Matty Diop would have that in her spades, really.
Yeah, it's a fantastic movie, Atlantics, and that's my number 6.
I mean, it's been a while since I've had to say, now, come on, it sounds bleak, but give it a chance. So my number 6 is For Summer by Waid Al-Khattab and Edward Watts. Waid Al-Khattab was living in Aleppo, the capital city of Syria, during the Syrian civil war. She managed to smuggle out video dispatches, which were played on Channel 4 News, which is, does fantastic journalism from around the world and will probably soon be closed down because it made a grown-up baby cry during the election campaign. And this knits those video diaries from Aleppo together into something which I think may be influenced by Humphrey Jennings' A Diary for Timothy, a really great British propaganda film made in the dying years of World War II, which also structured itself, as For Summer does, as an address to a child born during war, asking what kind of world they'll inherit, trying to explain to them the situation that they were born into. And that motif of the mother and child continues throughout the film. There is a scene where an apparently stillborn baby is revived that is one of the most emotionally grueling, yet ultimately joyful things I've ever seen. It manages to provide context and clarity to the Syrian civil war, which is probably the murkiest conflict in the world right now, in that the levels of disinformation from so many different sources are so dense. Yet after you watch For Summer, despite the fact that it's not, an explainer documentary about who the various factions are and who's backing them, you will feel like you have an understanding of it that no amount of news coverage will ever give you. It is really passionate, committed first-person reporting, and there is no reason why everyone shouldn't watch it. And that's For Summer by Waid Al-Khattab and Edward Watts.
Okay, then. So moving on to me, and I suppose this links with, well, I wouldn't say link, but it's another documentary. One of the few. If you want to call it a documentary, it's more a concert movie. And that is Sidney Pollack's, and I've forgotten the co-director, Amazing Grace.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this came out around about May time, and it's one thing that I don't like is gospel music. I'm not a fan, to put it in that context. But this was the long-lost Aretha Franklin documentary that came out, that was made in the 70s, but didn't get released until now because there was a massive problem with syncing all the audio to the visual. And trust me, when Sidney Pollack doesn't use clapperboards, then you really know you're in deep trouble. But with this, it tells basically it's set in a church hall for about 2 nights with Aretha Franklin at the core of a gospel choir, really, along with various people playing with their instruments, essentially. And one thing that it has, concert movies are always one of these areas. You have something like The Last Waltz, which is just so, I guess, just presenting the celebration of the band's music. And then on the opposite end, you have something like Stop Making Sense, which is just presenting you with all these creative ideas, but told in a very minimalist sort of style from David Byrne's imagination. I think what Amazing Grace does differently from this is that it's putting you in a place of comfort, in a place of warmth as it's doing it. And on top of that, it's got the most incredible music I think I've heard in a long time, because it, to say Aretha Franklin's talent is say the least of things. She had a Freddie Mercury quality where she could make
it's saying the sky's blue, isn't it?
Yeah. it's like Freddie Mercury, like quality, where she could make like the back person, someone sitting at the back benches, I should say, feel like they're at the front row, really.
Yeah.
And it just has that power to it. And when you see like the event unfold, where you see Aretha Franklin's father like take to the stand and just like discuss how he loves like his family, it just brings this backbone of emotion to the whole thing, of like this strengthening kind of feeling that you get from it. Honestly, it is a gorgeous film, absolutely stunning looking, and I think it's one of my favourite looking films visually that came out this year. And honestly, it's kind of a shame because I do think it gets buried a little bit from, you know, all the other films that we've had this year. But please, seriously, do give this a watch, because even for someone who doesn't like gospel music myself to praise this, honestly, I'm not lying. It is absolutely a stunning achievement that seemed to be like lost for ages, and it's so nice that it's been rediscovered.
Right, so before we close up for this episode, we'd like to talk about discoveries of the year, which is, you know, just a film that we've watched outside of our regular duty, not for reviews, not for film of the week, not for off the shelf, anything, just something we happened to stumble on that we liked. So, Rob, what was your favourite discovery of the year?
Well, I saw Blue Velvet for the first time, but I think we know that that's very good.
Yes.
I saw The Long Good Friday for the first time, and I guess we all know that's also very good.
Yeah.
But Fish Story as well, Japanese punk anthology movie about how a punk song saves the world from inevitable doom.
Yeah.
But considering that last year I picked Next of Kin, and then a few months later it was picked up by Second Sight and released, I hope that lightning strikes twice here, because
I think
the one that I want to pick out...
Yeah, use your reality-altering powers for good.
The one I want to talk about here is a 1999 film by Antonia Bird called Ravenous.
Ooh.
This has, I think it's music by Tom York.
No, it's Damon Albarn and Michael Nyman, isn't it, on Ravenous?
Yes. It's Britpop.
Yeah.
They're all melded into one after a while. But it stars Robert Carlyle and brain fart. One sec.
Guy Pearce.
It stars Robert Carlyle and Guy Pearce, and it's a Wendigo movie, a Western Wendigo movie about cannibals. The past 18 months, I guess, have been a real-time discovery for me in cannibal movies, because for one, usually it's, here is some Europeans or Americans who go to South America. Look at all the savages. Oh no, the savages are eating us. Lols. That's usually how these things go.
That's it, yeah.
But with Parents, which I talked about last week, with Eating Raoul, which I also think I talked about in this slot last year, which Aidan reviewed on the show, and I think he really liked that.
Yeah.
And now this, that's like pretty much a perfect triple bill, I think, I found. Because this is like one of those really, really dark and horrible style westerns, but it's full of all of these little components which make it absolutely stellar. Like, really interesting, really moody, and full of ideas, like about Native American folklore, which is a thing. Folklore is just generally a thing which I'm really digging on at the moment.
Completely.
But the thing which makes it cool, the thing that makes it really cool is this was a studio's attempt to make a successful movie. And it's like, the original director fell out, so Robert Carlyle, who worked with Antonia Bird, I think, on a movie called Face, said, I know this director, she'll do a good job. So she basically cracked this into shape in a few weeks, and it's just like a mash of all sorts of things which shouldn't work at all. None of it should work. But as far as movies that came out of nowhere for me this year, this was was this made for me?
Yeah.
And, it feels special when, you know, you watch a movie and you think, I've not seen this sort of thing before. This is amazing. Thank you, film gods. I appreciate this so much. And it's been utterly forgotten. Utterly forgotten. I hope that my magic powers means that it's going to be reissued now.
Completely, yeah.
So fingers crossed, because it's a good and Ravenous. It's very good, despite its generic title.
I think for me, my favourite motion picture of the year was HBO's Chernobyl. I feel like television is just like so much better than film now. There's work on it
Oh
that
no.
you may laugh, but I think like there's work on it that's really intelligent these days. That's good. But but no, seriously, actually, I sat down and watched Chernobyl, and I think it's one of those rare pieces of box set television which actually lives up to the hype. It is, I mean, the story is astonishing. It's like non-fiction threads. It's just stunning in the sheer scale, the sheer horror of what happened in Ukraine that year. But I think what makes it work, I mean, there's a number of things that make it work. It has a wonderful cast. It has Jared Harris and Emily Watson, and they're both good in everything. It has Barry Keoghan, who's rapidly marking himself out as one of my favourite young actors. There's like a whole Greek chorus of, oh yeah, that guy, I know his face type actors in the background.
Yeah. Ralph Ineson as well.
Ralph Ineson's one of the stars of, oh yeah, that guy style acting, isn't he? But I think what makes it work and what makes other pieces of transcendent television like Twin Peaks The Return or season 1 of True Detective work is that it is the work of one director. It's the work of a guy called Johan Renck, who directed the last 2 David Bowie videos and thought for his follow-up.
Oh, wow.
That he clearly thought he should do something even more depressing. And he's come up with this, and it has this sense of unified style, which doesn't exist in a lot of other television. I find television does often function by getting interesting directors and saying, all right, bland your style out so you can fit in with everyone else. And it results in visual media that isn't really doing much visual storytelling. But there is something in the way that Renck shoots that enormous kind of tomb-like grey concrete power station that feels like it seeps out into the rest of the film, and you could only get that sense of unity from using one director. And also the story strand with Jessie Buckley and her firefighter husband is just nightmares for months. It's remarkable.
I'll tell you who is a growing star. It is definitely Jessie Buckley for me. I mean,
she's had a good year, hasn't she? Yes.
Really, really excited. She's working on a film with Charlie Kaufman next, believe it or not.
Oh, is she in? I'm thinking of Ending Things. Is it called?
Yes.
Is that
yeah.
Right. I didn't know that.
Yeah, which I'm thoroughly excited about because it's just like, oh my god, I have to get on the bandwagon now.
Yeah, new Kaufman. Nice.
As for me, there was 2 discoveries that I could think of. I mean, the first one is something incredibly depressing, and the second one is absolutely mad. I'll get the really depressing one out of the way first, and that is Chantal Akerman's final film, No Home Movie. This is a documentary about her life along with her mother, and it's, on paper, it doesn't sound like it will amount to much, but there's just something in like the barren of emotion of it where I watched it for the first time on BFI player, and I just immediately said, oh yeah, there's something that I noticed between like my mother and grandmother. Oh yeah, I recognise that little bit of tidbit of information as well. It just gradually changes from something so like heartwarming and just soulful to something that is like incredibly bleak as an outcome that I think Ackerman just really does know where to position a camera in like long takes, really. The fact that she can make things into really like a poem, really, instead of like, so many other art house directors would achieve by other means, really.
Yeah.
I think it's just a fabulous, stunning film that, honestly, of course, it had me tearing up, I should say. And, it's a shame because
it didn't have you cheering up.
Yeah, definitely. But no, it's one of these films that, unfortunately, it doesn't really seem to have a home media release, which I would say that I say, BFI releases on Blu-ray now. Um,
Yeah.
Hey, who's got the superpower here? Hey.
Yes.
BFI, please release home no video. Yeah.
Hey, Graham was championing Magic Hunter last week to do that, so I'm going to do the same, damn it. But the other one, Rob, I'm going to have to make a confession. Shion Sono has finally clicked with me. My other choice is Guilty of Romance.
Though?
Guilty of Romance.
Well, that's an odd one for you to be the one that sort of clicks. But cool.
Very different film from No Home Movie, because and I'm going to swear here, it's absolutely bonkers. But it's just got all these things that shouldn't work for me, like luridity, yes, but it's also, full of sex, full of obsession, full of everything. But you do get this sharp sense that Shion Sono absolutely kind of detests these areas anyway, and just provides you with the ultimate, anti-punk thing that you've ever seen in your life. And not only that, it is absolutely entertaining from beginning to end. Even for something that's 2.5 hours long as this, it just really did work for me. And just how colourful, vibrant, just incredibly and funny on top of the same time as well. I mean, essentially what it is like a murder mystery whodunit kind of a movie, but then it just blends into all these different cataclysms of horror that honestly you can't really comprehend a human mind would conjure up this kind of stuff. And I think that's a testament of Sono's abilities, really. I'm not going to lie, I absolutely adored this. And, it just knocked me off my socks, really.
Nice.
See, on Sono's, he's got a good coke dealer. I love the guy, but he is so confrontational.
Yeah.
But I still love him. I love the horrible bugger.
Right.
There we go.
Yes. So we'll be back on January the 30th, I think we're going for this time. Sometime before the end of the year anyway, with 1 through to 5 of our best of the year, as well as what I think you're all waiting for, you horrible, cynical sods, our worst of the year as well. But until then, that's been your lot from Cinema Eclectica. I've been Graham.
I've been Rob.
And I've been Aidan.
See you soon.